Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2012's The House in Fata Morgana, the critically acclaimed visual novel about a mansion that brings misfortune to all who inhabit it, and the mysterious curse behind that misfortune.
Following that is the iconic first-person shooter adventure that mixed superhuman plasmid powers with the dystopian underwater city known as Rapture, 2007's BioShock. Joe, I'm just here for you and your stumping of this game. This might as well be your episode. I'm just here bringing an iconic game along for the ride.
I have waited so long. I am sure people are sick of me talking about this game, but I don't care. This is the only way that I can, hopefully by the end of this episode, I will have convinced somebody to play it soon so that I could yell about the plot with them. Who knows? So the theme that I sort of figured out was these are both games about idyllic locations that meet great misfortune. Obviously, Rapture is supposed to be this utopia. Granted, it was a bad idea from the start because libertarianism, but it was supposed to be like this grand city under the ocean, and then oops, it didn't end up that way forever. Meanwhile, I mean, who doesn't want to live in a mansion? I want to live in a mansion. Mansions are big and cool, and they mean you're rich. So I would love to live in a mansion. I consider that to be an idyllic sort of house. So those two things sort of worked out in my head at the very least.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's a good comparison, especially when that mansion is cursed. So it should be fun to talk about these games and their fantastic soundtracks, let's be honest. But let's first ask, Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Well, I did what I said I was going to do last week, and I sat down and played Telling Lies, all of it, in one sitting. It's rough. I'd say it's slightly bit longer than Her Story, but not that much longer. And it is basically just Her Story too. It plays the exact same way. It's searching keywords in clips, except instead of like watching interrogation footage, you are watching video calls, but only one half of a video call. So it turns out watching half of a video call is weird because there's a lot of dead air while the other person is talking, but you can't hear the other person talking because you're not watching their side. Which I actually have a bone to pick with you, Sam Barlow. None of those people are wearing headphones or earbuds at any point during this game. You're telling me none of them had any problems with echo? I don't believe it. I've been in enough Discord calls to know that is not the case. But yeah, it's a pretty good game. I wanted to get through it before I went and played Immortality, which I'm probably going to do this weekend, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I wonder if I should just go right to Immortality. And, I mean, I have Telling Lies, but part of me wonders almost for the compare-contrast point. That'd be interesting. I did not get to play anything this week. You also put out a couple reviews.
I did. I put out a review for Ooblets, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And I feel bad, and also I seem to be insane because everybody else loves it. And I played it for... According to my Switch stats, I played it for about as long as I played Live Alive. And I didn't enjoy my time, unfortunately. It's got a pretty good soundtrack, though, so I might still bring it to the show at some point. But yeah, unfortunate.
All right, let's talk about some composer follow-up news. We've talked about plenty of composers on this show. We like to sometimes keep tabs on how they're doing, what are they working on, what's going on in their world. Let's start with a couple media properties that are out now. We've got The Last of Us Part 1, the remaster of the original The Last of Us from 2013, although Naughty Dog's gone in from the ground up and done a whole bunch of animation changes and all sorts of, sprucing it up for PlayStation 5. It sounds like it's a really great way to experience the game. If you haven't experienced the game before, of course, this is all going to tie into that HBO show that's going to be coming out. They're going to use it as the Witcher 3 kind of did, I suppose, in a way to kind of push some more sales. But it sounds like if you've played the game recently, give it some space until you feel like you're ready to play The Last of Us again, and then give it a shot. But of course, music there from Gustavo Santaolalla, who we covered his work and that game on episode 13 of the show. Also, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Amazon's big money dump into creating a new Tolkien spin-off. It's now on Amazon and Amazon Prime and all that. The first couple episodes, at least, as of time of recording. And apparently Bear McCreary did the score for that show. And we covered his work in relation to 2018's God of War, and that was on episode 1 of the show. So neat to see either work being brought back or new work altogether.
Bear McCreary must have a really good relationship with the people making shows for Amazon, because this is like the third Amazon show he's done the score for. Like, he also did that C show with Jason Momoa.
Yeah, that's an Apple show, but I mean, even still, he's got his fingers in all sorts of places for sure.
Yeah, he just has been doing a lot of TV shows. I don't know if he's touching video games right now, but I assume he's on God of War, right?
I believe he is, yes.
Yes, okay. That's good. It's good that he's coming back to that. Meanwhile, hey, Shovel Knight is back in Shovel Knight Dig, which is a sort of roguelike-ish vertical platformer where you are digging with your shovel because you have a shovel, it turns out. That is coming to Switch, Steam, and Apple Arcade on September 23rd. Of course, music by Jake Kaufman, who did the original soundtrack for the first Shovel Knight and all its expansions. I'm very much looking forward to this. The Wario's Woods style Shovel Knight game was not really up my alley. It didn't really appeal to me. I forget what it's called. Pocket Dungeon. Yeah, Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. It didn't really appeal to me. But this I think I'm probably going to give a shot if I can. It looks very fun. It looks very good, and I'm always down for more Shovel Knight.
Absolutely, and I'm surprised it's coming day one to Apple Arcade. That's a good pull from the folks over there. There's a TikTok trend that's based on a Today I Effed Up Reddit post over on that TIFU subreddit talking about a music track that a guy enjoyed playing when he was spending time with his lady. And it's a song called Seabat, and the artist is Hudson Mohawk. And if that sounds familiar, well, we covered his work on episode 92 of the show because he composed the score to Watch Dogs 2. It's a trend that's taking off for a very rhythmically strange song, especially in that context that this gentleman wanted to use it for. And I just thought it was worth bringing up because Hudson Mohawk has seen it, he's aware of it, and you know what? That's where his work is being highlighted right now.
I'm looking at the comments for the song's YouTube video, and the best one is, keep in mind, this was his favorite song in the playlist. This is the one he wanted to share with the world and left us all hanging dry for the rest of his songs. That Spotify link gotta be worth money at this point.
The best is when his partner realized the rhythm of the song without it playing and told him to stop. Unbelievable.
Oh, what a weird place for one of our composers to show up. And lastly, it's not nearly as funny, but Portal 2 is now on Xbox Games with Gold, or it will be September 16th to the 30th. You should definitely grab it when it shows up, because Portal 2 is a pretty good game, and it will very briefly be mentioned in my section, weirdly enough.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, definitely grab it. It's definitely worth talking about and playing and all of that.
All right, everybody sit down, strap in, Put on your restraints that keep you from getting up out of your chair. It's my time. Here we go. We're going to talk about the house in Fata Morgana. Fata Morgana, as I'm going to refer to it from now on, because saying the full name is a mouthful, was originally released for PC in Japan on December 31st, 2012, and it did not get a worldwide PC release until May 13th, 2016. Japan got an iOS release on May 16th, 2014, and a 3DS release on July 27th, 2016. That's right, this game was on the 3DS in Japan. That's weird. It also got a Vita version that released in Japan on March 16th, 2017, and then in North America, we got it on May 28th, 2019. North America would then also get a PlayStation 4 release, which there's no Japanese release date on this, so I assume it was either a simultaneous release or only we got the PS4 version. That came out on June 11th, 2019. And finally, the most recent release was the Dream of the Revenants edition that released on Switch in Japan on March 25th, 2019, and then released here on April 9th, 2019. That is the version I would personally recommend because it comes with everything. On Steam, if you buy it, one of the side episodes costs, I think, $5 to $10 as DLC. I don't remember exactly how much, but that is definitely worth it. And also, the Switch works really well for this game because you can treat it like a book and just read it wherever. And I think that's very useful for this kind of thing. So, Fata Morgana was developed and initially published by Novectical, who is now known as Novect. The 3DS version was published by Furyu, Vita by Dramatic Create in Japan. The North American, Vita, and PS4 versions were published by Mighty Rabbit Studios, but all other versions, being the PC and Switch versions, were published by Manga Gamer in the West. And it was also briefly published in physical form by Limited Run Games. So what is Fata Morgana? Well, it's a visual novel. And this is the first pure visual novel we've covered in a very long time. The last time we covered just a straight up visual novel was all the way back in episode 8 with Katawa Shoujo.
Oh, wow.
That's it. It's been a really, really, really long time. We've covered stuff with visual novel aspects, stuff like Professor Layton, Phoenix Wright, Persona, Danganronpa, Zero Escape. Like, all those have visual novel aspects to them, but they also have other gameplay to go alongside it, whereas Katawa Shoujo and Fata Morgana are just visual novels. You're reading a lot. And yeah, this one is a novel. It is just reading a book, and that book happens to come with pictures and music. I will note there is no voice acting whatsoever. At all. Except for in one of the side episodes, which is the last one that you would play, but I didn't listen to any of I turned the voice acting off because at that point I already had a picture of what these characters sounded like in my head. And 2, it's all in Japanese, and when the game takes place in Europe, that's weird. So, that kind of thing. But that is the only one that has any kind of voice acting at all. Occasionally, though, you will be given a set of options for either things to do or ways to respond to something that has been said or asked of you, though these don't happen very often in Fata Morgana, and most of the time, they are the branch that decides whether or not you are moving towards the true ending or immediately getting a bad ending. Which I kind of appreciate. If you make the wrong choice, you will have the bad end within 5-10 minutes instead of hours down the line and realizing you accidentally picked the wrong thing. But yeah, that's a thing that should be known. There are 8 endings. Most of them are bad ends. And then there's the true ending, which is actually very linear. There is one ending, quote unquote, and it's very easy to get there, and the game is very determined to make sure you get there in time. So, the plot of Fata Morgana. You awake in a chair in front of a crackling fireplace, and a maid kneels beside you with a smile. She refers to you as Master and exclaims how happy she is that you have returned at last. But, problem. You have no memory of who you are or where you are. The answer to where is figured out pretty quickly. You are in a mansion, one that is dark and seemingly uninhabited, save for this maid. The maid refuses to tell you either her name or yours, choosing instead to jog your memory by giving you a tour through the mansion and showing you recollections of the various eras through which the mansion has existed, claiming that one of them is sure to jog your memory. Every door she opens leads to a new story, taking place in 1603, 1707, 1869, and more. All of them focusing on a different historical resident of the mansion as they all meet terrible misfortune. For you see, this mansion was said to be home to a witch once. This witch placed a curse upon the house, and all who reside within it are destined to meet tragedy and despair. All of these tales are seemingly unconnected except for one thing: the appearance of a mysterious white-haired girl. So, the questions become, who are you? Who is the maid? Are there any other connections between these tragic stories? Who is the white-haired girl, and why is she reappearing in all these different time periods? And was the mansion truly home to a witch, or is she just a myth? Or perhaps, could she possibly still inhabit the mansion to this day? And here's where I will ask, Peter, what are your experiences with the House of Fata Morgana?
The first time I heard about this game, it was in regards to its unusually high Metacritic score, which I'm sure you will get to at some point when we talk about how it reviewed and all that. But then, I've heard good things about it from other people, and then suddenly glowing praise from you. So I have been eager to learn more about it. It has been a long time, I think, since I have played a pure visual novel. Probably, ironically enough, the last time I played Katawa Shoujo. So yeah, I've played a lot of visual novel likes, as with the franchises that we've discussed, but yeah, it's been a while since I've played a pure visual novel. Maybe this is one to pick up and remedy that.
So pretty much the exact same thing. I have tried to start visual novels in the past, but I just I hate to say it, but I think video games has ruined my ability to, focus on reading a book. Because I haven't been able to do that in years either. I just don't have the patience to sit down and do it. I don't know what it is about it. I think it's too much silence while I'm reading. So for me, it was basically the same. The last time I had the patience to sit down and play through an entire visual novel was Katawa Shoujo, and that was what, 09?
11,
Probably
maybe 12.
Yeah, 11.
Yeah.
11 or 12 sounds a lot more likely. It's been like a decade. So I also heard a couple of people in NWR actually talk about how, no, this is one of the best games I've ever played, etc., etc. And I knew about the Metacritic score thing, which you are correct. We will get to that a little bit later. And so I bought it when it was on sale at some point, bought it on Switch. And I kind of expected to maybe last a couple of hours and then end up having to move on to something else and then forget about the game, and like I do with so many games. But no, I devoured it. I devoured every single possible word in this entire game. There's the main game, there's the 2 side episodes, there's a bunch of side stories that go along each episode. I read all of it. Every single thing. I think the last time a game had this much of an impact on me was probably To the Moon. And if you've heard me talk about To the Moon in the past, I do not make that comparison lightly. The only thing that makes it kind of a hard suggestion is it is long. Like, the main game, I think, took me around 30 hours to read the whole thing. It's very, very long, and it is a lot of reading. And again, there is no voice acting, but I do think that it is absolutely worth the time. It has nudged itself into my top 5 games of all time. I have been listening to the soundtrack pretty much nonstop for the past month and a half. And, I don't know, it really, really struck a chord with me, and I really enjoy it. And like I said, I have been waiting so long to talk about it, and by so long, I mean like a month and a half, which is not that long, to be perfectly fair. So, Fata Morgana was written by Keika Hanada, who spent an entire year just on writing the story. And it was heavily inspired by the films Millennium Actress and The Best of Youth. I'm not familiar with The Best of Youth, but I have seen Millennium Actress, and I can absolutely see the comparisons between those two stories. As well as books by an author I'm not familiar with named Tanith Lee. Art was done by an artist by the name of Moyotaro. The game kind of strives to have a more realistic art style for its characters, as opposed to what you would expect from a visual novel out of Japan, being anime. It's got a not very anime aesthetic, honestly. If you had told me this game was not made in Japan, I would have believed you. I actually did not know that Nevectical was a Japanese studio until after I finished the game, because the localization is very, very good, and I would have believed it was, like, made in Europe or something like that. The style that he chose to go for was this sort of... It looks almost like painting. It's got a heavy amount of shading. The colors are very sort of dulled and very heavy is the way that it's described. And the idea was to give it a, quote, more realistic kind of beauty. I love the art style of these characters. I think they look fantastic. It is very obvious that a lot of the backgrounds are, we took a photo of a place and painted over it. Which, I mean, Katawa Shoujo has the same thing.
100%, it's a classic.
It's the easiest way to make a background. I mean, if it works, it works. The art actually got redone for the PlayStation 4 version, as that would be the first time the game would potentially be able to be viewed in 4K. And so the art that was being put on, say, a 3DS wasn't going to cut it. That wasn't going to blow up well. And this is, of course, the version that will be ported to Switch. So the version we have is the one with slightly reworked art. Though for the side episode that was added with this release, a different illustrator had to come in and do all of the art because Moyotaro was ill at the time of development. You can absolutely tell it's a little bit more anime in that episode, but that's okay because that episode is a little bit more anime than the regular game anyways, so it works out, I think. So another major focus and consideration was how the game would be written, which in Japanese, they decided to go for a mostly modern dialect, but a few older words peppered in. And this also became a major issue for the localization team as well, because most of this game takes place in old Europe, like old Europe. So they had to decide, well, I mean, are we going to go really authentic and just write everything in Old English? Or are we going to write it in modern dialect completely? And they kind of decided on a middle ground, just like the Japanese team did, where because Old English would be a bit hard to read for most players, they decided to just use modern English for the most part, but pepper in some old words somewhere in there. So, for instance, instead of bedroom, they say bedchamber, and instead of maid, they say Abigail, and stuff like that. Which, did you know Abigail was a word for a maid? I didn't until I played this game.
I was just going to say, today I learned.
Yeah, I had no idea before playing this game. Speaking of localization, though, this game took a really long time to get localized. Almost didn't leave Japan because it was unknown if doing so would be financially viable at all. Nefectical at one point had even suggested, what if we took every bit of the game's revenue from sales in Japan and just all that money went straight to localization? And even then, the game didn't really do well enough to pay for that. So it sort of floundered and had some false starts a couple of times. Like, obviously this was going to be a pretty expensive localization. It's a 30-hour visual novel. That's a lot of text to translate and localize and all that. And it was finally announced in August of 2014 that Manga Gamer was handling the localization of the game, which fit because apparently they are a company that was specifically created to localize and release Japanese visual novels outside of Japan, though their Wikipedia page states that most of the games they bring over are Eroge novels.
Oh, okay.
Which is okay. This is not one. So people are aware, this is not one of those.
Also, people who are not aware of what those kind of games are, you do not have rhythm to the game's soundtrack with these games. Okay.
They are games not for children. Very, very much not for children. So, when this game came out on Switch, for a period of time, the House and Fata Morgana Dream of the Revenants edition would not only dethrone The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild as the highest rated Switch game on Metacritic, it also did that with a perfect score of 100.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Now, it should be noted it is no longer that. That's no longer the case.
Also that it's based on not many people reviewed it.
Yeah, that is also the thing. It's gone down slightly since then. It now sits at a 96, so above it. It is 1 point below Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. And recently, like within the past couple weeks, it is now tied with the Portal Companion Collection.
Well, there you go.
Being the ports of Portal 1 and 2 to the Switch, which are also at a 96.
Okay, and for what it's worth, BioShock's original release, a 96 on Metacritic.
Well, that's an interesting... Huh. Well, there's our secondary theme. 96s on Metacritic. It doesn't seem to have taken home any awards for anything, as far as I can tell. The only thing that Wikipedia mentions is that it was a runner-up for the publication Hardcore Gamer's Best Story of 2016. It lost to Firewatch, which I like Firewatch a lot, and I think Firewatch's story is very good. That is the incorrect choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just more people at that publication did not play Fata Morgana.
If you're wondering, the other three runner-ups were One Shot, Yomawari Night Alone, and Zero Time Dilemma. So it might have also just been a slow year for storytelling.
Zero Time Dilemma now on Xbox. Go play it and be disappointed by that conclusion.
It got 2 extra episode add-ons. As I mentioned, A Requiem for Innocence is a prequel story that gives more details to events that are merely verbally described in the main game. It is actually probably my favorite part of the entire package. It is absolutely fantastic, and the part that I think made the biggest impact on me, which is saying something. And then there is Reincarnation, which is a sequel story that is meant to be the definitive end of the whole thing. There's also a 4-volume manga adaptation, but apparently you will not find it here because the first 2 volumes came out in Japan, and then the next 2 were digital only in Japan, and then all 4 of them were digital only here. So good luck. Novect is actually currently working on their next game, which was announced back in, May. So I got here just in time. The game they're working on is a mystery game about solving a serial murder case. It looks like it's It is not a visual novel. It is a, like, investigation Ace Attorney style game. It is currently being called Project Codename M. And I don't personally expect it to be as good as Fata Morgana. That is a very high bar that they are going to have to pass. But day one buy for me. 100%. I will give them my money the instant this game comes out, which is set to be within the next 2 years. So 2023, 2024, somewhere in there. So there were many composers that worked on Fata Morgana, but the one we're going to focus on here is Yusuke Tsutsumi. Tsutsumi was born in Tokyo, Japan in 1991, and he started composing music at age 14. He is also a known director and cinematographer in Japanese film, seemingly mainly known for his film The Perfect Gray, which screened at the Tokyo International Film Festival in 2017. He described his musical style as, quote, "His style is basically ambient and alternative, but his romantic and dynamic approach never remains on those two categories, as his sound is exploring emotional waves without boundaries." And I don't know what any of that means, but that's what he wants you to think of when you think of his music, so I figured I'd bring it up. You can find his very interestingly named website at artificialnakedwoman.com, which I guess is named after one of his albums. What a name. You can also follow him on Twitter at _Yusuke Tsutsumi. He also has a YouTube channel under his name, though it appears to have gone inactive 2 years ago. So he doesn't seem to post there anymore, but it's there if you want to see it. There are videos. In terms of his discography, he's done several Japanese movies and TV shows. He seems to score all of the movies that he personally works on. Fata Morgana seems to be his only foray into video games, with his most recent credit being for the film Midnight Made in War, which released earlier this year. That was one of his films as well. Though, in fact, as far as I can tell, according to his website, The House in Fata Morgana is actually his earliest professional composing credit. He was 21 years old when he did music for this game.
Wow.
In terms of historical development research, the music was composed, like I said, by a pretty large group of people made up of Yusuke Tsutsumi, Gao, Mellok'n, Takaki Moriya, and Aikawa Razana. It was officially released on a 5-disc set, but the official release on streaming services like Spotify and stuff where you can find it is split into 2 volumes. There are 65 tracks in total, about 4.5 hours of music for this game. It's a lot of songs.
Well, when you got a lot of words to cover, and you need to cover with music, sure enough.
There was a large emphasis put on including vocal tracks on the soundtrack, and for that reason, over half of the songs include vocals in some form. Some of them are straight up vocal tracks. Some of them just have vocals as a backing instrument and stuff like that. This was not only to make it stand out among other visual novels, but also to give the aesthetic of being in a theater watching the story as somebody sings in the background. For whatever reason, though, and I didn't know this until I started researching, all of the vocals are in Portuguese. All of them. I don't know why. This game does not take place in Portugal. It's very vague about where it does take place, but I'm pretty certain it's not Portugal. When you have characters with last names like Bollinger, that's not Portugal. But all of them are in Portuguese. And apparently kind of broken Portuguese, too. Which, I mean, Japanese composers writing in Portuguese, that's to be expected. If I tried to write a song in, like, French, I would also write broken lyrics in French. I don't speak French. So, understandable, but still, the music's still good regardless. And let's talk about that music, because I've waited too long, and it's time to do so. Our 5 critical tracks, the first of which is The Maid Piano. The song was composed by Mellok'n, and this is basically the first song you hear when you start the game. It is, as you might guess from the title, The Maid's Theme. And it's got this very quiet, simple air to it that I think is supposed to sort of reflect that she is seemingly completely alone in this mansion for who knows how long. And there's also something slightly off with her, which is reflected in another version of this song that I want to give a brief shout out to, being The Maid Affected. Which is the same song, but now distorted and reversed, and this first hint that there's something really weird and off about this maid. I wonder what that is. What's up with that? And I think this is a perfect introduction to the game and sort of its overall tone. It's got this sort of sad feeling to it, while also having this creepy undertone when it gets into Affected. And to me, it's one of the definitive songs of this game in general.
I can also imagine, you starting this game and this track plays very early on and it's a solo piano and just kind of sinking you into the experience right away. Good to have that other track as a comparison. Nothing says something's wrong here, like those kind of distortion effects on it, some organs in there. It's an interesting comparison between those two. But yeah, especially if you have this kind of base point with this maid character, pretty important theme, I'd guess.
Mm-hmm. But let's get into the complete opposite, and also the complete opposite of what you'd think of when you think of this game. Critical track number 2 is Ephemera. This song was once again composed by Mellok'n. This song is largely used in the Era of Roses. A lot of these songs are used in multiple places, but the Era of Roses is what I associate this song with the most. That's the very first door, so it's the first story you see. And most notably, it plays in the beginning of that chapter because everything's happy. It's all going well. Look, there's children. They're singing merrily. This will never go away. Everything's going to be this happy forever. It should be noted that the definition of ephemera is things that exist or are used or enjoyed for only a short time.
Yep.
Which is very fitting for this. This is the only chapter that is about literal children being... They're teenagers. But they're also kids that have been living the easy life because they're nobles in the 1600s, which means they're rich as hell and they don't need to worry about poor people. So I think this song really, really brings across that sort of carefree, childlike wonder and life and how sort of sheltered these kids are. And I don't know why, but I really like the children chanting part you can hear in the clip of the dun, 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 and the clapping. It's fun.
The clapping is very different and would not have expected that along with, this kind of energy, this kind of positivity. But you're right. If something stands out strangely, especially with that kind of title, it's going to get a shout out here, but with the caveat that we're showing the range of what's on the soundtrack here.
This is probably the happiest song on the soundtrack. There really isn't anything that gets much happier than this.
Well, clap to that.
There's stuff that's like more on the romantic side, but this is the only one that's like, yay, life is good. Because, of course, when you're playing a game about a cursed house, eventually that all has to come crashing down. And that is reflected, I think, best in critical track number 3. This is Labyrinthia. One more time, this was composed by Mellok'n, Mellok''N. Oops. Everything went wrong. Everything went very, very wrong. This plays at a few places throughout the game, but I associate it with a very specific part, which is the ending of the Era of Roses. Because up to that point, you have this idea of what the tone of this game is going to be in general. And then this moment happens, and it is an immediate slap in the face, and this is the kind of story we're about to tell you. Strap in, because things go as wrong as they could possibly go. And this song and the moment that plays during it, especially with the way that they play with visuals during it, is the exact moment I think where the game fully hooked me. It is really amazingly presented. I think this song sort of does really good at portraying the fact that in this moment, and in the various moments where this plays, like, somebody has snapped. They have reached their breaking point. It is done. It's over. And things are going very poorly for everybody around them. Just especially with, you've got the whispering voices going on in the background. That's really creepy. And this song does super well at the tone it's supposed to portray.
Yeah, it's like muffled spoken word, and it's playing with panning. It's super, super creepy. But to go with the music box as a backing and then hit with like the heaviness and the chorus, and yeah, that sure sounds like that kind of breakdown moment. I can see how this would grab your attention easily, and it must be a powerful moment to be sure.
It is a very, very good moment. It is also it's kind of uncomfortable, but it's supposed to be, so it works out. My favorite song on the soundtrack, though, going away from breakdowns and sadness, though this one does have a little bit of a melancholy feel to it, this is my favorite track on the entire soundtrack. Critical track number 4 is Sisio. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot of piano on this soundtrack. Can't imagine why I like it so much. This song was composed by Gao, and the vocals are also her. And this is the song on the soundtrack where no matter what scene it is playing in, this is the one that starts getting the waterworks going, just in general. Just because of what it is associated with overall. And also, it's just really pretty. Like, this is a really, really pretty song. The vocals are very well done. And yeah, it's my favorite song in the game. I looked up what Sisio means in Portuguese, and apparently, at least as far as I could tell, it translates to rustle or swish. which I think is probably meant to symbolize a slight disturbance of something or a slight movement towards something, which this song is one that is more associated with a romantic aspect of the story. So I think that fits very well. It's just a gorgeous song, and I absolutely adore it.
Yeah, just a really nice and pleasant piece to listen to, and just beautiful in all sense. I think I agree with you when listening to this. I don't think I would have pegged Portuguese.
Yeah, me neither.
But maybe that's, telling with it being somewhat broken. I don't know, but like it works, at least for like believing the world that they're trying to create. It works.
I had assumed Italian for a couple of these songs.
Right.
This one being one of them, before finding out it was in fact Portuguese. There's one on my cutting room floor that should be in Italian, and it's not, and it's weird. We'll get to it though. But I mean, yeah, it works really well. I still don't know why Portuguese of all languages, but it is absolutely gorgeous, and they absolutely kill it with this song, I think. But it's time to bring the mood back down as far as it could possibly go, because the final critical track number 5, this is Everybody's Crying. And let me tell you, that's an accurate title. This song was composed by Yusuke Tsutsumi, so there we go, we got him in there. And the vocals are also apparently him, which is incredible because they sound like a female vocalist. That's really neat that he was able to pull that off. This song is also known as They Are Crying. These track titles were not translated great. So between YouTube and Spotify, and sometimes between multiple uploads on YouTube, they are called different sort of variations on the same title. So on Spotify, this is They Are Crying. On YouTube, this is Everybody's Crying, etc., etc. This song plays during multiple scenes, usually very, very sad scenes, involving one of my favorite characters in the entire game. But for me, the scene that I'm most associated with is possibly one of the most heartbreaking moments I've ever seen in anything. Ever. Like, one of the most gut punch death scenes I've ever experienced. And this song, despite, like, you'd think those vocals would get kind of annoying after a while, because that's the whole song. That goes through the whole song, basically. But they really don't. And I cannot listen to this song without thinking about that specific scene. And that means that they did a damn good job, especially when this song plays during multiple sections. It's just fantastic and sad, and in certain parts has this sort of undertone of anger, which really, really fits for this character. And I don't know, this song is just one that has stood out to me since I've heard it. It is great, especially in context.
I was going to say, I feel like context is everything with this one, because you listen to it without knowing anything, and it's like, okay, it's sad, it's emotional, but to be tied to that moment that sticks with you, obviously it's doing something right as far as pairing visuals with audio.
I can't say much about the scene. I want to say so much about it, but I can't. It's my favorite scene in the game, and also is the one that, after it happened, I kind of had no response, but that was not fair. You can't do that to me. That's not fair. And, it's just really good. And this song really drives it home. All right. So, you know how sometimes we'll be like, there's a lot of songs on this soundtrack and I want to talk about more of them. Hey, you have songs on your cutting room floor, right, other host? Well, I pulled the privilege of doing that this week. So, I assigned Peter 2 so that I could talk about more. So hit me, Peter.
All right, well, look at that. I got a couple more songs to talk about. The first of these on my cutting room floor is Fecciame. Well, I think you picked well for me. I think this might be my favorite one to listen to so far. The key that this piano is in is really nice, and it builds nicely. You get a little bit of vocals coming in at the end of the clip, and it works out really nicely. Yeah, good pick there, Joe. Thank you. Tell me about it.
Thank you. This song was composed by Gao. It is heavily associated with the character Bestia, which is Spanish for beast. So that should tell you a few things. This is the other big breakdown moment song, specifically for this character, because he needs it. He has a lot of them, and it fits very well for the things that are happening during his particular breakdowns. The title, from what I can tell, in Portuguese seems to translate to close or lock up, which is very fitting for the character in question. So that was looking up what some of these names translate to leads me to realize some of these titles are really clever and very thematically appropriate.
Almost like they did it intentionally, yeah.
Oh, it's almost. But that can't be the case. But yeah, it's got some fantastic piano to it. It definitely has this sort of hectic feel to it. And I think the vocals almost also give it almost a violent feel to it. There's, in certain parts of the song, sort of a backing of a very, very quiet electric guitar, which I think is also meant to bring across like a feeling of violence. You don't get a name like Bestia by being peaceful and good. So, you know.
That's fair. And then the other one on the cutting room floor for me is the Fata Morgana. Okay, something pretty different altogether. Love when all those instruments come in and bring like the full power of everything. That's got to be a pretty neat moment to listen to while you're reading. But yeah, the off-kilterness that this makes you feel with the straight bass kicks of the drum, and then the warbling almost feels arrhythmic for the vocalist there. It is unsettling, and then just drive it into the full instrumental hit. That's a neat one. Another good pick.
Yeah, this song was composed by Takaaki Moriya. It is also known as Morgana's Curse. This song is probably like the closest to a villain song that the game gets. Because while this character is kind of the villain of the game, they're really not. And this song, I think I know where this plays, but I don't know 100% for sure. But this is a character that is very, very, very hateful. And they have a really good goddamn reason for being hateful. And this sort of reflects that sort of hatred and the actions that they take in the course of developing it. And I think that it has this really good dramatic feeling to it. People in the comments refer to it as, oh no, it's the final boss. Because it does at times sort of feel like a Final Fantasy boss at some point. But I really, really, really dig this song. I think it's got this very evil, angry, like you said, off-kilter feel to it, and it works very well, especially for the character for whom it's associated with.
A villain-like track checks out. Good pick.
All right, so for my 2 tracks on the cutting room floor, remember when I said there's a song that should be in Italian, but it's not? That's my first track on the cutting room floor, being Ciao Carina. Now, the first thing you might notice is that, wow, this is a different genre from what I expected. Because it's lounge jazz all of a sudden. That's odd. This happens to play during the section of the game that takes place in 1869. So that's the farthest in the future the game goes. And so the sort of aesthetic of orchestrated European choir, that doesn't really work when people are walking around in suits and with fedoras and stuff and talking about the invention of the camera and things like that. So you have this. It was composed by Takaaki Moria once again. It's one of the more recognizable pieces from what is called the era of steel, and it should be in Italian. The title is Italian. It translates to Hello, Cutie. The chapter is about an Italian man, like a man from Italy. But no, these lyrics are still in Portuguese. I don't know why.
I'm shocked, but I love it. More like this, please.
This is the other one where I was like, this is an Italian, right? This song has to be in Italian. I just assumed. There are like 3 or 4 songs like this on the soundtrack specifically for that chapter, because they're the ones that they need to exist for that chapter. And this is one of the favorites of fans and people in general. It's also the first one you hear when you enter that chapter, so it's fantastic. I really like this song a lot.
Yeah, I can see how it would be very different for the time, but yet fittingly so. And I would be all about it not that the other stuff is bad. Like, they do a great job matching the tone and feel that they want to, but yeah, I would probably spend more time lingering and reading these parts a little more slowly to enjoy the music, I think.
When your last chapter involved, like, villagers going in an angry mob to kill a beast, and this chapter starts with people playing billiards in a lounge, you can't have the same tone or feeling for both things. It doesn't work. So it's it does very good at that, I think.
I didn't see Soul, but if Beauty and the Beast is like the first part of that, what's the Disney movie that has billiards and jazz clubs going? I don't know.
Princess and the Frog.
Oh,
it's got a very Princess and the Frog feeling to it, honestly.
Okay, I feel that.
And for my second track on the cutting room floor, if this was a critical 6 and not a critical 5, this song would be on there. This is one of the songs that is considered holy ground by the fan base, I guess. But it was between this and CCO, and personally, I just like CCO better. But this song is also very, very good. My second track on the cutting room floor is Giselle.
Estoy contando os dias que nós passamos. O que você esconde de toda calada, não me deixe somente.
This song was composed by Gao. Once again, the vocals are her. It is the theme for the character Giselle. There are like 3 or 4 characters in this entire game that get their own theme. You heard earlier, the maid gets her theme, Giselle gets her theme, and there's 1 or 2 more characters that arguably get their themes. But this is the one that people talk about when they talk about character themes in this game. It's very, very pretty, first of all. Like I said, it's very similar in tone to CCO and plays in very similar situations. This one has a bit more of a personal impact in terms of a character. In fact, there is, not in the clip, but there is an electric guitar part late in the piece that I associate with a very specific, very, very good scene. And I really don't know what else to say about it. It's just a very, very good song. One of the side episodes has a piano rendition of it, which is also extremely good. And this is one of the fandom's favorites in general.
And sometimes you got to go in that direction, right? The fandom usually is right when picking really good songs, but yeah, I can see why they would be so drawn to this one, especially if there's a piano rendition on top of it all. Good stuff.
When I was looking for the transition piece, in the comments of that video, somebody was like, hey, can you cover Giselle next? And the response from the channel owner was, that song is holy ground and I'm terrified to touch it.
Fair enough.
Like, I absolutely get it. It's one of the most popular songs in the game, and there's a very good reason for it. So what will I never forget about the house in Fata Morgana? I didn't expect to like this game as much as I did. Even if I finished it, I kind of expected to be like, yeah, that's pretty alright. Alright, next. I have not stopped thinking about this game since I finished it. I wish there was more. I'm glad there's not more. The ending is very good, and I don't want any more with these characters ever. But there's also this part of me that's just like, but I want to read more, though. To the point where I have a couple of times actually legitimately had to fight off the thought of, what if I just read it again? I'm not going to do that. I have other things to do. Maybe in a couple years I'll read it again. I don't know. But yeah, it has handily shoved itself into my brain and into my heart. And I absolutely adore this story and the characters involved in it. A couple characters in particular I just really, really love. There are the two characters that A Requiem for Innocence focuses on. And believe you me, one of these days I will bring A Requiem for Innocence specifically to this show. But unfortunately I cannot right now because it is impossible to talk about it without majorly spoiling the main game. So, but they specifically left a huge impact on me. And in general, it's just a really, really good story. And a really, really good cast of characters that this game has successfully nudged itself into my top 5. I don't know what it's nudged out yet, but something has to go because I cannot justify putting this any lower than number 5. Like, 5 is the limit.
Well, I'm really glad that you got to bring it to the show. So thank you for doing that. It was really good to learn about, and I'm glad that at least for you, it delivered and it's worthy of its high accolades that it got on Metacritic. Because, yeah, that always stuck out as, that was an oddity there, and no, it's that good. So worth checking out at some point.
I don't know if I agree with a 10 out of 10, but a 9.5 maybe. The second door I kind of don't like. That's the only sticking point with me. It's my least favorite part of the game. But past that, like, everything is fantastic. All of it. And I also just really like... There's 2 quotes that I really love from this game. One is comedic and the other is not. One of them is the Italian man. And it's the best quote I've ever heard from any video game ever, which is, "How dare you fly my country's flag and not serve spaghetti?" Just fantastic line. Whoever wrote it is a genius, deserves a raise. But the serious line that I find coming to mind a lot is, "Until our souls cross paths once more in the boundless sphere of fate." So, for our transition, we like to do a fan cover, a fan remix. Not a lot to choose from on the internet, but there are a few. Mostly covers of either CCO or Giselle. Those are the two that people cover. And in fact, the one I found that really made me want to use it is a cover of CCO by a channel titled Music I Made on My Old Phone. And it is just a man with an acoustic guitar, and he plays and sings CCO, and he's very, very good at it. And I hope you enjoy that. And we will be right back to take a trip under the sea.
Segredo-me espata com boca fechada, ainda te buscando peios, fome inteira, desnudas as palhas.
When you go on down to Rapture, man chooses a slave obeys. Oh, no, that's not how that song goes? Okay. Well, let's still talk about BioShock. Let us go under the sea, finally, because it's been a long time since we went up in the air to Colombia. We talked about BioShock Infinite on episode 36. And that was the game that we paired with Doki Doki Literature Club. Boy, that was an episode.
Back in the very first spooky season.
Wow, it sure was. And we're really close to our 4th spooky season.
Yep, that's weird to think about.
Oh, boy. Well, BioShock sure is a kind of spooky game, I guess. It was released on August 21st, 2007 in North America for Xbox 360 and PC, with PAL regions having to wait just a little bit longer until August 24th. A PlayStation 3 port took some extra time and effort, releasing in October 2008. There's apparently even an iOS version that released in August 2014. But the best place to play this game today is through BioShock The Collection, which is a remastering of the 3 games in the franchise, and that released in September 2016 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC, and it finally came to Nintendo Switch in May 2020. BioShock The Collection was actually a free PlayStation Plus game in February 2020, so if you've been collecting those for a while, you actually may have that game and may be able to play the original BioShock Remastered. I remember getting it as a free update on PC. They were nice enough that, if you have BioShock or BioShock 2 on Steam, you just get the remastered version for free as a patch. So, thanks, Irrational and 2K.
Yeah, I remember just seeing it in my Steam library and having that moment. You ever have that moment where you look at a game in your Steam library and you're like, did I buy that?
Uh-huh, yep.
I don't remember buying that. I have a lot of those games. BioShock Remastered was one of those moments.
Though I guess BioShock Remastered wasn't totally the entire responsibility of Irrational Games. See, the original BioShock was developed by 2K Boston, which was a renaming of what was Irrational Games at the time, as well as some help from 2K Australia, and it was published by 2K Games. The PS3 port was developed by 2K Marin and 2K Australia, as well as Digital Extremes, while Blind Squirrel Games worked on the remasters in the collection. What is BioShock? Especially when we referenced in the original BioShock Infinite episode, it's like, BioShock's this classic game. Well, BioShock is a first-person shooter with role-playing game customization and stealth elements wrapped in a survival horror atmosphere. The player collects multiple weapons and special powers called plasmids. Well, I guess, plasmids are like the gene serum that you pump into you to give yourself special powers. It's just kind of interchangeable. They call the powers plasmids. Anyway, you got weapons and plasmids, and you work your way through enemy forces. The player can switch between one active weapon and one active plasmid at any time, allowing them to find combination attacks that can be effective against certain enemies, such as you can shock a splicer with your plasmid, this electric bolt power. and then you knock them with a wrench and dispatch them easily that way. There's also some side content, like a Pipe Mania-like minigame where, the flow's starting at this point in the square and it's going to go to this point, and you got these different kind of pipes, so put it all together before the liquid leaks out. Anyway, it's a way, I guess that's how you hack objects in this game.
It's not very good.
It's probably the weakest part of the game. I would totally agree with that. There's also a research camera, which I totally forgot about, that you get enemy knowledge, and as a result of researching these enemies, you get buffs against those foes. One of the biggest aspects that the game influenced throughout the entire game industry was its use of audio logs, being collectible items that you'd find throughout the world, and that you'd play these audio logs in the background as you continue to explore the world, and it'd be a way of a character from the past telling you a story or a conversation between a couple characters. And so instead of shutting the whole game down to listen to this conversation or listen to this bit of world building, like a Metal Gear Solid codec or anything like that, you've got to navigate through a menu. It's just a way to play it as you continue to explore Rapture. It's just super smart, and every game with audio log has been trying to do it since.
Unfortunately, the audio logs in BioShock are kind of a victim of the future. Being that, like you said, this was a new thing back in the day. Now every goddamn game has audio logs, and everybody's really sick of audio logs.
Yes, yeah, 100%. But I think, there are some kinks to work out, but the concept at the time was just so neat and so fresh, and a great way to build out this world of Rapture, because the plot of BioShock involves Rapture, this large underwater city that was planned and constructed in the 1940s by individualist business magnate Andrew Ryan, who wanted to create a utopia for society's elite to flourish outside of government control and petty morality. The advances in the arts and sciences that they discovered down in Rapture led to the discovery and creation of a gene-altering substance called Adam, which was used to create plasmids. They are mutagenetic serums that grant users superhuman powers, like telekinesis or pyrokinesis.
Or bee-kinesis.
Bzzz, terrifying. At the beginning of the game in 1960, the player assumes the role of the silent protagonist, Jack, who is a passenger on a plane that crashes in the Atlantic Ocean. As the only survivor, Jack makes his way to a nearby lighthouse that houses a bathysphere terminal, which takes him down to Rapture. But Rapture is in shambles, and something tragic has happened here. Jack is contacted by a working man named Atlas via radio, and he asks Jack to help him locate his missing family inside Rapture. As Jack is guided to confront the perils of the ruined city, he'll meet its remaining people, including the mad surgical doctor J.S. Steinman, the insane artist and musician Sander Cohen, and the humans who were subject to failed experiments with Adam, known as splicers. So the big questions here: what caused Rapture to fall to this tragic fate? Will Jack be able to find Atlas's family? And what happens when Jack comes face to face with Rapture's creator, Andrew Ryan? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with BioShock?
For a while, I think I would have called BioShock one of my favorite games of all time. I still like it. I don't know if I would call it that anymore. I think other stuff has nudged it out over the years, and also I've only played it once. So I've heard that it is not the most fun game to go back and play a second time, because once you already know the twist and everything, a lot of stuff just sort of loses its luster. But even then, Rapture is one of the coolest video game locations ever. I remember it being a good game. I do remember, and I've heard multiple people talk about this to back it up, that the last 2 hours of the game are terrible. Which is something that every BioShock game apparently has in common, because Infinite also has that problem.
It just goes zoom.
It sure does. I think the atmosphere of BioShock is fantastic, and I kind of wish that Ken Levine wasn't such a dick. Like, not a problematic dick from what we know, but he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, he's on that auteur status, and it sounds like there was a whole bunch of crunch associated with this game. So, problematic development at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And what's going on with his next game, Ghost Story? Like, what's going on there? We gotta maybe hear what's happening there. For me, BioShock was a game that I tried several years after it came out, and I didn't really like it. I didn't get too far in it. I didn't like the feel of like the first person movement and all that, as I was still very new to like controlling first person shooter games. And then the remastered version came out in 2016. And I'm like, you know what? It's one of those games where everybody talks about it. I've had some more time with first person games. Let me give BioShock another try. And you know what? I beat it and I'm like, all right, it's good. I see where it was super influential and like really new for its time. But also by that point, it was almost 10 years old. It's a little rough on the aging as far as just how it plays, some of the weird oddities about it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Rapture is A+ world design and atmosphere. It's also interesting to have like the philosophy that it brings to the game. Granted, we'll talk a bit about how objectivism is a comically just not great ideology. So we'll get to that.
Andrew Ryan is one of the first experiences I have in my life of idiots looking at him and going, wow, that guy's super cool, and not realizing that no, the game is making fun of him and people like him. Yeah, absolutely. And then unfortunately, we see people these days latch on to others who think and act that way. We're just not going to name any names there. But even still, like, it was refreshing a little bit, I think, especially at the time, to like have a video game tackle those kind of subjects and make you think about the philosophy of that. So I appreciate what it did at the time. And it's still, I think it's a good game, but I think it's, I almost wonder if I want to even compare it to something like Resident Evil 4, where super influential and changed the scope of video games at the time. But if you're going to it for the first time these days, may not hold up as well as everybody tells you it does. Honestly, I think that sounds about right. I would pretty much accept that. I think when we covered RE4, we had the same conversation of like, people say this game is perfect and they're wrong. Mm-hmm. There are parts of it that did not age super well. And I would say that much of BioShock has that problem as well.
Yeah, I think there are reasons that, Capcom is currently remaking and modernizing Resident Evil 4 to fit certain industry standards these days. But yeah, I think you could probably say the same with BioShock. So let's talk about that development for BioShock. In 2002, Irrational Games, under the direction of the aforementioned Ken Levine, wanted to create a spiritual successor to their critically successful, but financially less so, their game from 1999 called System Shock 2. The team had come up with this core gameplay mechanic idea that was based on 3 groups of forces: drones that would carry a desirable resource, protectors that would guard the drones, and harvesters that would attempt to take the resource from the drones. Eventually, these would all bear out in BioShock as the Little Sisters, Big Daddies, and Splicers, respectively. But at this time of the concept, there was no set theme. And so when they put together a demo that involved a cult deprogrammer that was on a space station with genetically mutated monsters, almost sounds a bit like Dead Space or, every other video game in 2022 and 23. The publishers weren't biting at the time, so hope was thin on the development team. But then the internet picked up wind that the team behind System Shock 2 was interested in making a spiritual successor. That hope and interest was out there, and so development on the concept continued with this renewed hope and interest. And by 2004, 2K Games, a subsidiary of Take-Two Interactive, offered to publish this game, primarily based on the drone protector harvester concept, giving Irrational Games the freedom to develop the story and the setting. By this point, the setting concept was an abandoned World War II era Nazi laboratory that had been recently unearthed by 21st century scientists. But then some things happened. The scope expanded now that they have a publishing team, and that led the team to grow from 6 to 60 people working on the development of the game. And also, a little game called Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005, and it was influential with its approach to the environments, the combat, its tools, the game design, its tactical elements, its gameplay-fueled storytelling, and its inventory system. So, the thematic core of BioShock was born when Levine was walking at Rockefeller Center near the GE building in New York City. He saw the uniqueness of the Art Deco styling of the building, along with the imagery around the building. There's that statue of Atlas with the world on his back. And he recognized that these were spaces that had not been experienced in the first-person shooter genre yet in games. The whole Art Deco building design, the whole larger-than-life, statue design of this mythical sort of quality to it. And so the history of Rapture and the character of Andrew Ryan ends up being loosely based on John D. Rockefeller's story as, quote, a great man building an architectural triumph against all the odds. Levine also brought in the ideas of objectivism that Ayn Rand primarily outlined in the book Atlas Shrugged, that man should be driven by selfishness and not altruism, and used this to inform the philosophy behind the City of Rapture and Andrew Ryan's work, viewing them as quite ludicrous and primed to be applied to an antagonist, tying in with his previous observations of who Rockefeller was through his writings.
But, is a man high Tyler the service, bro?
Oh, a man chooses, a slave obeys. There are other artistic influences that included 1984, Logan's Run, The Manchurian Candidate, the works of Aldous Huxley, and industry figures like Walt Disney. More people to look up to and inspire to. Anyway,
Andrew Ryan, I would believe 100% that his appearance is Walt Disney in every way.
Oh, you're so right. He
looks like Walt Disney.
You're so right. That's very, very true. Good point. The game ultimately released with a final budget of about $25 million. And even then, that was a stretch where 2K wanted to get the game out the door, and you got 3 more months. All right, let's crunch you harder than you've ever been crunching before. What? What's that? You've been crunching terribly. Well, crunch some more. It was a different time. In a 2016 interview, Levine felt the game could have used about 6 more months of development, actually. He says to improve the gun combat system and fix lagging issues that occurred during the final boss fight. And yet, the game reviewed exceptionally well, with a Metacritic average of 96 for its initial release and 94 on PlayStation 3. It was praised by critics for its narrative, themes, visual design, the setting, and the gameplay. It is considered to be one of the greatest games ever made, and a demonstration of video games as an art form. There are some minor criticisms out there, one of them being this black and white morality choice that was popular with games at the time. It was involving the little sisters, and what do you do with them? Do you extract the atom from them, killing them, or no? Do you let them be free? And some game designers and game critics thought that this was ultimately a mechanic that had no real importance. Maybe it only affected the ending that you got, and even that was a choice forced by the publisher on the development team. Like, Ken Levine wanted only one ending to BioShock, and the publisher was like, no, you must have multiple endings. Let's have it be about this little sister choice. But even then, people are pointing out that, like, it's really only like a 10% difference in Adam at the end of the day. So, like, does it really mean anything? Anyway, it's a fair point. Also, ludonarrative dissonance gets brought up, as you often do in games where you're shooting and killing people, but that's also a thing. By March 2010, BioShock had sold 4 million copies. There's not much information beyond that, not even for all of the years since 2010, but also with the remastered collection. Don't know how much that sold either. But it was an awards darling. It was nominated for 7 awards at the Spike Video Game Awards, winning Game of the Year, Best Xbox 360 Game, and Best Original Score. It was nominated for 2 awards at the BAFTAs, winning Best Game. And it was nominated for 12 Interactive Achievement Awards, these would be the DICE Awards today, winning 4, with Outstanding Achievement in Art Direction, Story Development, Original Music Composition, and Sound Design. Several publications, like Game Informer, also awarded BioShock as their Game of the Year. It is remembered fondly for its location, its storytelling, and its big twist. John Lanchester of the London Review of Books recognized BioShock as one of the first video games to break into coverage of mainstream media to be covered as a work of art arising from its narrative aspects, whereas before, video games had failed to enter into the cultural discourse or otherwise covered due to moral controversies that they created. It's also one of those long-standing Hollywood films that, like, yeah, we're making a BioShock movie, and, like, it never really pans out. Like, you pick up the rights in 2008, and what have you done with it? But Netflix seems to be actually picking up that mantle, announcing a BioShock movie project in February 2022, and actually selecting its director and writer just last month.
I think I agree with one of the criticisms I've heard of the idea that Netflix is picking this up, is that Netflix doesn't have the budget to do Rapture.
No.
They just don't.
Unless you're going to go on, like, Disney, Lucasfilms, like, big, CG wall, maybe.
Yeah, they don't have the budget to make Rapture look like Rapture. It's not gonna, the movie's gonna suck, is what I'm saying.
Well, we'll even see if it gets made with all the stuff Netflix is going through anyway. On the game's legacy front, of course, sequels would be made. There was 2010's BioShock 2 that Ken Levine wasn't involved with, and then he returned to the franchise with 2013's BioShock Infinite. There are also lots of rumors around the internet right now about the next entry in the franchise. 2K confirmed that the next BioShock game was in production in 2019, under a development team by the name of Cloud Chamber, with development taking, quote, the next several years. Quote unquote, BioShock 2022 was part of the NVIDIA GeForce leak. But it also could be coming as late as 2024, based on some troubled development tales. And there are also job listings at Cloud Chamber that note that, work will be done in Unreal Engine 5. So it could be a long ways away. There's rumors about it. Oh, it takes place in 1960s Antarctica, and the team has, full breadth, and they know they're going to be compared against the first BioShock. Let's just keep your eye on this one. A game will be coming. I don't think, the BioShock series is not done quite yet, but looks like it's going through some growing pains.
There's also a novel. I've read it.
How's that?
It is a book. It's been a very long time. I don't remember if it was good or not, but it's basically a book about the founding of Rapture. It's a prequel book. I remember it being okay. It's surprisingly big. I don't remember anything else about it though, but I do know that there is a novel, and I owned it at one point and read the whole thing.
Did you ever play the DLC to BioShock Infinite?
I did not. I don't think I ever bought it. I've also never played BioShock 2.
Yeah, I haven't either.
At the time, I heard oh no, it sucks. It's a bad game. But over the years, I've heard a lot of people be like, no, actually, BioShock 2 is better than the first game. And I don't know what to believe. So I'm pretty sure I own it. I've just never touched it. And yeah, I haven't played Burial at Sea. I don't know. I haven't really heard much about it.
Well, allow me to be the first to say that Burial at Sea, especially Part 2, ties directly into the original BioShock in a very concrete and specific way.
Interesting. One day I'll play it.
There you go. To talk about the music to BioShock, it's one thing to say, yeah, Gary Scheinman worked on the score. Well, we've talked about Gary Scheinman, so go check out that BioShock Infinite episode if you'd like to learn more. We'll kind of cover him a little bit because there's quite a bit of research involving the soundtrack and the score to the original BioShock, which Gary Scheinman is involved with. But we're going to talk about someone different, and that would be Martin Chalifour. Martin Chalifour was born in 1961 in Quebec, and he is the principal concertmaster. That's a very fancy word for saying he is the top first chair violin. He's been the principal concertmaster of the Los Angeles Philharmonic since 1995. He's still there today. Super talented violinist. He graduated with honors from the Montreal Conservatory at the age of 18, and then moved to the United States to continue studies at the famed Curtis Institute of Music. He started his orchestral career in 1984 with the Atlanta Symphony, before spending time with the Cleveland Orchestra. Internationally, Chalifour performs a diverse repertoire of more than 60 concertos, and has appeared as a soloist with orchestras including the Auckland Philharmonic, Australia's Queensland Symphony, and the Hong Kong Philharmonic. He also teaches at Caltech and at the USC Thornton School of Music there in Southern California. On the video game front, on like VGMDB and Moby Games and different sources like that, he's only credited as performing on BioShock and BioShock 2 as a solo violin and violin soloist, respectively. But other than that, he hits the symphony circuit hard, I guess, and not really involved in other music projects there. The historical development research then for BioShock involves a score not only being composed by Gary Scheinman, but also the game uses licensed music from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And these are diegetic source music more often than not. They're often heard playing on phonograph throughout Rapture. According to audio director Emily Ridgway, the selected licensed tracks, some of which come from her own personal record collection, feature, quote, a really interesting juxtaposition of a happy, quirky, musical razzle-dazzle number, and then they'd be singing about how the world is ending. It was supposed to mirror the optimism and the decay at the same time, those two things sort of coexisting with each other. Fascinating to think of that as it directly mirrors Rapture there. So after he scored Voyeur in the 1990s for Philips CDI, Gary Scheinman returned to video games in 2004 with THQ with Destroy All Humans. He met Emily Ridgway there, and as a result, she made the call to bring him on to compose for BioShock, especially after the decision was made at the studio to have, quote, in all caps, no electronic music in the score. They decided that they wanted no looping music, no dynamic music. Even some combat cues were written very late in development, and like only a few of those, like 3. Overall, the score inclusion is very light. It's often like playing in cues as you enter a new part of Rapture, and a lot of it is just like letting the player live in the world. Like hear the sound design of an underwater city, listen to the audio logs, listening to the enemies and the diegetic music that's playing on those phonographs. Like a lot of that, and then the score just punctuates it just nicely. Scheinman composed his pieces to blend in with the chosen licensed music in order to keep the same feel, while also trying to bring out something that was, quote, eerie, frightening, and at times beautiful, end quote, to mesh well with Rapture's environments. He also used what is called aleatoric music. And this is a term I had not heard of before, so let's teach it to you. So aleatoric music is music in which some element of the composition is left to chance, or that some primary element of a composed work's realization is left to the determination of its performers. And so it's these elements that create this randomness, this dissonance, this tension, and then kind of offsetting that with solo violin, and that would be Martin Chalifour. So, coming together and realizing that this combination of things with the aleatoric music and the solo violin, like that's the Rapture orchestra sound that gives it that nice background for the score. 2K Games released an orchestral score soundtrack, I believe for free, on their official homepage on August 24th, 2007, and it contained 12 of 22 tracks from the main OST release. So what is this music from BioShock? Well, let's get into the 5 critical tracks for the game, and we start with this one that everybody knows. I feel like everybody remembers, especially if you played only some of the game. This is Welcome to Rapture. Just an incredible piece of music. Of course, these composed by Gary Scheinman on this one. But yeah, right from the beginning of the clip, you hear that solo violin from Martin Chalifour. And wow, what a virtuoso performance. It's got to be so difficult. Joe, I'm sure you can appreciate that with your time playing stringed instruments.
I sure as hell couldn't do it. I'll tell you that for free.
Just amazing. And this is a case where this being the descent in the bathysphere and viewing Rapture for the first time from the outside and just basking in the awe and the spectacle. You even hear that moment in the piece when that hits. It's a total change in musical tone. But that is specifically scripted. That's the point where it's not like, oh, it's dynamic, it's based on whatever the player's doing. No, it's like a set moment where it's like from picture to score, like it's specifically scripted out so that when that hits, that's when that moment drops and they time it up just right. A very impactful moment, just very early on for the score and its effectiveness.
Yeah, a really well done intro. And yeah, you're right. This is, if you know a song from BioShock, you should know this one because, again, it's one of the first songs you hear, and it's just one of those establishing moments that kind of sticks with you when you play, for the most part.
The second track on the cutting room floor is actually going to be one of those licensed tracks, and it's the one that I feel stands out the most when remembering and talking about BioShock. This one here is Beyond the Sea.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me, my lover stands on golden sands and watches the ships that go sailing. Somewhere beyond the sea, she's there watching for me. If I could fly like...
It's totally one of those songs where it's like, oh, yeah, I've heard this one even like outside the context of BioShock. Though, I'm sure with BioShock and Rapture, it becomes all the more prevalent and relevant there. So this version of Beyond the Sea is performed by Bobby Darin, and it's from 1959. So it's a little bit after the events of Rapture, chronologically, but it still makes sense to be playing currently if the game's taking place in 1960, right? So the song is more often than not used in the game's marketing. Like there's a trailer that uses this song to great effect. But as far as the melody, there's another version of the song called La Mer. And this one is by Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. It's a slower, more instrumental version of the song, but you definitely hear the same melody for sure. And this is one that plays at the beginning of the game inside the lighthouse. So before you drop and experience that song, Welcome to Rapture, I just feel like we had to open with Welcome to Rapture because like that's the one. But this is another one that's like right up there, especially Beyond the Sea and Bobby Darin's performance.
One, I think this also plays on the main menu or the title screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Two, I've also heard this song outside of BioShock, which is why I hate it.
Oh, what's that?
I used to work in an Italian restaurant that we won't name, and this was one of the songs on the playlist.
Ah, well, yes.
So that ruined the song for me just a tad.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Well, yeah, especially those, kind of establishments when you only have so many on the playlist, you hear it a lot, I'm sure.
Boy, do you.
We continue, though, with the score from BioShock with number 3 on the Critical 5. And this one, oh my goodness. This one here is Cohen's masterpiece. Gary Scheinman, you mad genius. What a brilliant piano concerto here. It can be also titled Cohen's Scherzo No. 7. It is generally recognized as the theme of Sander Cohen, who is one of the leading figures of Rapture's art community. He's a poet, composer, sculptor, and playwright who is ruling over Fort Frolic. This piece is heard primarily in the game in the Fleet Hall in Fort Frolic, where Sander Cohen forces the unfortunate Kyle Fitzpatrick to play it perfectly. You will not hear the full song played fully to completion for reasons that you'll discover in the game. Found out that apparently the song also makes a return in BioShock 2, where it's like a boss theme, like that's playing in the background of one of that. So that's a neat little recollection there. Just an incredible piano performance here, and I'm so impressed by the composition here. Even YouTube comments are like, I wanted to try playing it, but it is way too difficult. Just crazy. It reminds me of Cynthia's theme when you approach her in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. It's just as far as like the intense, dramatic piano theme that sounds so impressive.
I could see the comparison to Cynthia's theme 100%. I think Cohen's section is probably the part I remember the most outside of like the famous scene. Though I still don't remember a lot about it. I do remember he's wearing like a bunny mask and he makes you do some like weird stuff. I do think I remember this guy trying to play it on the piano though. But yeah, I don't think I've ever actually heard the full piece. So yeah, I can't imagine playing this on piano. That doesn't sound real. Nope, can't do it.
It's just super impressive. Love it. Number 4 on the Critical 5 tracks for BioShock. This one here is called Dancers on a String. This song first plays when Sander Cohen is introducing himself to you with his creepy dancing sculptures, but it also plays during the encounter with Andrew Ryan and a famous sequence of the game, to be sure. I feel like Dancers on a String is also a fitting title. I wanted to point this out in particular, I think, because you hear the aleatoric inspirations there. You kind of mix in the clarinets there, the woodwinds that are kind of just seemingly making up their own thing as it goes along, and it creates that uncomfortable random tension in the piece, and you kind of hear that at the end of the clip there. But yeah, I feel like for playing it at a key moment in the piece, and also for some of those musical elements that we mentioned, this is a good one to include.
I mean, if it's the thing that plays during the Andrew Ryan scene, like, that's the scene. This needs to be here. And also just, it's got some good atmosphere to it. Like we said earlier, BioShock Rapture has some fantastic atmosphere behind it in general, and it's songs like this that I think really back it up.
Yeah, there are definitely some spookier tracks to include, and I feel like we'll mention one of those that kind of drive into more of the like survival horror roots a little bit. We'll get to that on the cutting room floor, but this is a good one to include. That tension there is so well done. And then we'll wrap it up with number 5 on the Critical 5 tracks, and this one is The Ocean on His Shoulders. I was surprised to see that this song in particular was noted on soundtrack releases and the like as BioShock main theme, The Ocean on His Shoulders. And I think it plays a bit at the beginning sequence for a little bit, but primarily most people and most fans seem to recognize it for being what plays during the ending sequence and what plays out, deciding what happens with your choices with the little sisters and all that. But yeah, I always think of BioShock and I think Welcome to Rapture, always. But I guess technically this is the main theme, so to speak, of the game. And it's good to hear Martin Chalifour's performance on solo violin again. It's not as crazy and hectic and all over the place, but it's more leaning into the emotion of the solo, the slow notes, the building of the emotion there. Super effective, just works very nicely for wrapping up the experience and however you ended up playing it out.
Yeah, no, I disagree. This is not the main theme of BioShock. It's Welcome to Rapture. That's the main theme of BioShock. I mean, this is good, and it does bring back memories of... What ending did you get?
Oh, I got the good ending.
I also got the good ending. I think the good ending is the good ending, the ending that should be there.
Yep, I feel like that was probably, especially when you see some of like BioShock Infinite stuff, like that was probably the one that Ken Levine really wanted to have be just the ending. The other one's just really strange.
It's just kind of a heartwarming ending, the good ending. And I like it. And that's what this reminds me the most of. Very, very pretty violin. Still, at the beginning at least, still has the... Usually that sound is... reserved for bugs, but there aren't any bugs in Rapture, so I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know if some water bugs got through the cracks. Who knows? All right, some tracks on the cutting room floor. I've got a couple, of course. This one really stands out on the soundtrack as just being very different. We'll talk about a music technique here, but this one is The Docks. I believe that this piece takes place in the Neptune's Bounty area of the game, where there's a whole bunch of docks. I mean, that would make sense, but couldn't find anything confirming that. Wanted to highlight this piece, as you probably just heard. It sounds very different, but also really creepy, and it uses this technique called musique concrète, and it's a type of music composition that utilizes recorded sounds as raw material. So you're taking these random bells and these random like tightening strings And then you have like random accordion bits, almost like it's an Irish jig that's going on with workers that could have been at Rapture. A bunch of different sounds coming together to create this soundscape that is super creepy and just kind of leans into the uncomfortableness, but yet there's a whimsy, especially with that accordion.
You know me. This is my stuff. My word I can't say on this podcast.
Your jam.
This kind of song. Yeah, my jam, baby. I love songs like this in horror games. The version that I had way back in the day of this song also had like a violin piece at the beginning, like a really happy-go-lucky violin piece that sounded like it was playing on a radio, which I also really like that. That's not in the clip. It's also not in the YouTube video that's on the outline, because I assume it's not actually part of the song. But yeah, when it's just this sort of almost soundscape of things happening around you, like I absolutely adore songs like that in horror games.
Absolutely. It works very, very well. Well, I don't know how we've avoided spoilers until this point with BioShock, one of the most famous game twists and all that, but if it's really an issue for you, maybe we duck out now. Let's get to the other track on the cutting room floor, and this is All Spliced Up. There's some chaotic energy, some battle energy, and I believe this plays during the final boss confrontation. Just a lot going here with the crazy strings, the intense percussion. You have almost like this train engine sound going with the horns that are kind of muffled in the background. It's a lot here, and it kind of matches the industrial feeling that's kind of going along as well with this final encounter. I don't think we have to say necessarily too much, but let's just say you probably shouldn't trust that Atlas fellow, as a whole bunch of revelations get dealt out in a short period of time at the end of BioShock. I found a bit of trivia very interesting, where there was apparently a critical playtest session with different players in January of 2007, so like 8 months before the game is going to come out. Players there immediately distrusted Atlas, who was apparently at the time voiced in a southern drawl described by players as a lecherous Colonel Sanders. So they ended up changing his voice acting entirely, giving him an Irish voice to make him more trustworthy. So yeah, still creepy, this one for sure, and it's more of a combat music piece, but, to represent the big final boss confrontation. But yeah, just another different range on the spectrum. I mean, these two cutting room floor tracks couldn't be any more different, I think.
First of all, you heard it here first. Southern accents are immediately untrustworthy. I don't trust any of you that have them.
You could do different studies of dialects, and there are different predispositions and prejudices about certain accents, that's for sure.
It's really interesting. But second of all, I like the boat whistle that is incorporated in this song.
I guess people refer to it as a Boston whistle?
I've never heard that phrase, but I would believe it, I guess. It's too bad the final boss sucks. But, at least the music is pretty cool.
Absolutely. It was a really neat soundtrack to learn about overall. So what will I never forget about BioShock? A game that, I gave a second chance, returned to, and liked. But there is such a thing as games aging. And while it did so much for the industry and for game design and how to write more mature themed games in 2007. When you look at, 10, 15 years, we just passed the 15-year anniversary of BioShock. Like, that's crazy to think about. But yeah, it's one of those where art, especially at the time, it's art, but there are ways that we have improved games since then, and it's good to learn from and just to kind of reflect where we've been and where we go. I mean, but those twists, like those, stick with you for sure.
And for me, it's just Rapture. Rapture is cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool location for a horror game. Turns out, the bottom of the ocean is terrifying. And they didn't even need to bring in all of the deep sea fish that are nightmares that live there.
No, you're absolutely right. Like it's perfect, top-notch environmental design and just the atmosphere down with the bathysphere. All right, Joe, hopefully you got your wish as you got to talk about one of your favorite games of all time now with the house in Fata Morgana. I mean, I feel like it was fitting to bring in BioShock in there. I mean, we're talking about places that have just terrible tragedies happen to them. So that's nice and fitting. But yeah, these soundtracks go so well together, I think. And it was, I think, a really solid episode to cover here. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want. That's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smash Your Pieces, is hosted. And you can find Smash Your Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a podcast feed of episodes, but we also have a playlist where if we talk about a video game track on this show and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to this monster playlist. Joe, is there anything that's being added this week?
So Fata Morgana is on Spotify. Weirdly, and I feel like this came up when we talked about Infinite too, BioShock isn't. BioShock 2 is, and BioShock Infinite is not.
That is so strange.
Just that one. Odd.
Odd indeed. I think that's a good way to put it. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Also, suggestions for games to cover. We are rapidly getting close to the end of 2022, and that is terrifying. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Toxic Avenger. Not the movie, the person.
And I'll be talking about Sachiko Watabe. All right, to play us out, it obviously had to be Welcome to Rapture to talk about a fan cover, a fan remix, and this is the song to do it from this game for sure. But what if it was just a solo piano? And that's what Wolfyk did on YouTube. WOLFYKH. They did a piano cover of Welcome to Rapture. It sounds as good as you think it might. So thank you for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.